The terrifying fate of Cobra gunship crews in Vietnam. Today, we're delving into the gripping story of the AH-1 Cobra, the world's first dedicated attack helicopter. We'll explore how it revolutionized aerial warfare, its pivotal role in the Vietnam War, and two chilling accounts of missions that tested the mettle of its crews. The idea of attack helicopters didn't come from idle brainstorming. It was born out of necessity. In World War II and the Korean War, fixed-wing aircraft showcased their devastating firepower, but they also revealed critical shortcomings. Their ability to operate effectively in rugged terrains or provide precision close air support was limited. Worse, they often took too long to respond to urgent calls for help and couldn't linger over the battlefield. Troops needed something faster, more agile and versatile, a platform capable of hovering and staying in the fight. During the Vietnam War, helicopters took center stage. The dense jungles, mountains, and narrow valleys of Southeast Asia proved too challenging for traditional aircraft. Enter the AH-1 Huey, an icon of the era. It ferried troops, evacuated the wounded, and resupplied units in the field. But the Huey had one glaring vulnerability: it was unarmed. As transport helicopters approached landing zones, they became sitting ducks, turning these critical moments into deadly gambles. In the early days of the war, the US military tried arming Hueys with machine guns and rocket pods, creating improvised gunships. While these modifications offered some protection, they added significant weight, reducing speed and maneuverability. The Huey gunships were simply too sluggish and vulnerable to enemy fire for high-intensity combat. It was clear a new kind of aircraft was needed, one designed specifically for the rigors of war. Bell Helicopter stepped up to the challenge. Using the engine and rotor system of the Huey, they created something entirely new: the AH-1 Cobra. Introduced in 1967, at the height of the Vietnam War, the Cobra's sleek, narrow design made it a formidable predator. Its fuselage was less than 9 feet wide, drastically reducing drag and presenting a smaller target for enemy gunners. The streamlined profile also enhanced its speed, allowing the Cobra to hit 170 miles per hour, perfect for rapid response and low-altitude combat. The Cobra's two-person crew consisted of a pilot and a co-pilot gunner seated in tandem. The gunner sat in the front, with an unobstructed view ideal for precision targeting, while the pilot managed flight operations from the rear. Both crew members were certified pilots, and both positions had flight controls. This redundancy was a lifesaver, literally, when one crew member was incapacitated. The cockpit and vital systems were protected by tempered steel seats and light armor, offering sufficient protection against small arms fire without compromising agility. Cobras rarely flew solo. They operated in pairs or groups, relying on coordinated tactics to maximize their effectiveness. Their low-altitude flying style helped them evade radar detection, but came with its own risks: unpredictable terrain, heavy weather, and relentless enemy fire. One extraordinary rescue exemplifies the Cobra's versatility. After Captain Ronald Fogelman's F-100 Super Sabre was shot down, a Cobra crew rescued him by having him cling to the helicopter's exterior during the flight back to safety. Daring feats like this became a part of the Cobra's legend. The AH-1 Cobra wasn't just an agile platform, it was a heavily armed one. Its chin turret could be equipped with a 20mm 3-barrel rotary cannon, a 7.62mm minigun, or a 40mm grenade launcher, or a combination of these. Underwing pods carried up to 38 Hydra 70 rockets, which came in various configurations, including fragmentation, smoke, and illumination. Later models even featured AGM-22 missiles capable of taking out tanks or fortified positions. Compared to the armed Hueys it replaced, the Cobra carried twice the ammunition and had triple the loiter time. This made it an ideal escort for troop transports and a devastating attacker in its own right. The Cobra first arrived in Vietnam in August 1967, and it didn't take long to prove its worth. Around 1,100 Cobras were deployed during the conflict, with roughly 300 lost to enemy fire or accidents. Their greatest threats were heavy machine guns, anti-aircraft guns, and later in the war, Soviet-made surface-to-air missiles. Despite these dangers, Cobra crews flew daily, providing life-saving support to ground troops. One of the most audacious tactics employed during the war was the hunter-killer team. This strategy paired Cobras with OH-6 Loach scout helicopters. The Loaches acted as bait, flying low and slow to provoke enemy fire. Once the enemy revealed their position, the Loach would drop smoke grenades to mark the target, and the Cobra would swoop in to unleash its firepower. While effective, this tactic was incredibly dangerous for the Loach crews, who often suffered heavy casualties. Now let's dive into 2 harrowing missions that showcase the perilous reality of Cobra crews. The first tale takes us to June 18, 1968. First Lieutenant Taylor and his fire team of 2 Cobras were dispatched on a nighttime rescue mission. A long-range reconnaissance patrol had been surrounded by a superior enemy force deep in hostile territory. When the Cobras arrived, the situation was dire. The patrol was pinned down, taking heavy fire. Taylor requested artillery illumination and began low-altitude attack runs, using rockets and machine guns to suppress the enemy. For 45 minutes, the Cobras fought valiantly, but they were running out of ammunition and fuel. With no safe ground evacuation route, Taylor made a bold decision. He instructed the patrol to move to a small clearing 100 yards away and turned on his searchlights to draw enemy fire away from them. His wingman fired off the last of their ammo to shed weight, and Taylor landed under heavy fire. 4 soldiers clung to the helicopter's skids and rocket pods as Taylor lifted off, making a desperate flight back to friendly territory. Running critically low on fuel, he managed to save the patrol. For his heroism, Taylor was awarded the Silver Star, later upgraded to the Medal of Honor. The second story comes from Captain Hugh Mills, who served as part of a hunter-killer team. On January 29, 1972, Mills and his team were called to search for the crew of an F-4 Phantom that had been shot down. The mission quickly turned dangerous. While the Loach helicopters scouted the crash site, Mills' Cobra hovered above, ready to strike, but during one pass, a malfunction caused one of his rockets to strike the Cobra's tail rotor, severing it entirely. The Cobra spiraled out of control and crashed into the jungle. Mills was knocked unconscious, and his co-pilot John Bryant suffered severe injuries, including a broken neck and back. When Mills regained consciousness, he managed to establish radio contact with a nearby Loach. A Huey was dispatched for extraction, but the dense trees around the crash site made it impossible to land. Instead, medics were lowered on hoists, working quickly under the constant threat of enemy fire. Another Cobra provided covering fire as Mills and Bryant were hoisted to safety. Both men survived and eventually recovered. These stories highlight the courage and resilience of Cobra crews. They operated in some of the most hostile environments imaginable, facing threats from the ground and the air. Their missions often determined the fate of the troops they supported. The AH-1 Cobra may have been a machine, but it was the bravery and skill of its crews that made it legendary. The Cobra's legacy lives on, influencing every attack helicopter that followed. Its design principles and combat tactics, forged in the jungles of Vietnam, remain integral to modern military aviation. The lessons learned and the sacrifices made ensure that this chapter of history will never be forgotten.